What's up, heathens? How ya doing? I'm the Godless engineer, and I critically analyze apologists' claims to give you the best arguments and information so that you can stand up and use your voice. Tonight, we're going to be taking a look at a video from I guess a theologian is what she is. She's got a lot of degrees and everything like that, but this one YouTube channel, this one organization sat her down and asked her about some atheist arguments against the existence of God. Now, I have some issues with what they call atheist arguments, but we'll get into that in a little bit. But if you want to fuck around and find out exactly how bad these atheist arguments are, then please stay tuned. So tonight on the live stream, we've got Nancey Murphy, who is going to be giving her professional responses to a number of common objections to the Christian God. It's specifically the Christian God because she's Christian, and really her issues with what the pushbacks are really coming from a Christian perspective. Let's see what Nancey has for us.
Nancey, atheists are not just attacking theist views, they have their oin views.
Yes.
Wait a second. Right off the bat here, I have to really push back against this because I don't see atheists as attacking theists. Like, that's a really weird way to contextualize the discussion being had. While there may be some atheists out there that unnecessarily target, somebody that just generally believes in God, but most of the time when we're pushing back because there's somebody that's making a poor claim, or there's somebody that's just outright lying about what's in the Bible or misrepresenting the God that they believe in. And so we push back against it because we ourselves were duped into the religion, or we were indoctrinated into the religion, believing those things, and those things are wrong. So, it's just a way for us to push back against a belief that we formerly held. I don't see it as attacking theists or even religion in general, although I think it would be fine if you did attack religion. Right off the bat, it kind of seems like a weird way to contextualize the discussion.
They talk about the pointlessness of the universe, the violence in the universe, the evil in the universe, the wastefulness in the universe, the imperfections in the universe.
Well, yes, we do talk about those things, but only because of the claims that are made by theists, namely that like this universe was created for us, or this planet was created for us. A number of those things kind of factor in. Also, this whole idea of an omnibenevolent God, if God was really all that good, then, why in the fuck does he allow all this evil? Or why did he create a reality where this evil does happen? And all of these kinds of points to point out problems with the Christian theology. It's not like we read the Bible and then we went out and started attacking theists. We've read the Bible. We were indoctrinated with the Bible. We left those beliefs behind, and now we're just responding to the people that keep repeating the things that we used to believe but believe no more.
What does a Christian theist say to all that?
Well, how would you know that the universe is pointless unless you had already decided that there is no God that gives it a point? So that's definitely a circular argument.
Well, so whenever somebody brings up the whole pointless, we don't exactly, at least I should really frame this as like how I argue things. Obviously, how I argue things isn't how all atheists argue things. I don't ever argue about come at it from the position of, oh, this universe is pointless. I don't think that there's any transcendent purpose or meaning to the universe, and I don't think that the fact that nature is amoral, or it's oblivious to our existence, and it doesn't have an intelligent mind or anything like that. As far as like the purpose for why the universe exists, yeah, there's no purpose. But I don't think that we need a purpose in order for us to find purpose in life and to enjoy the life that we have. This isn't just like, oh, we're assuming God doesn't exist. It's that the evidence doesn't show that a God is necessary necessary for nature to exist or for this universe to exist. And so we don't see any need for a transcendent purpose or a transcendent meaning. It's because of the lack of evidence that points us in the direction of God do we come to that conclusion. The way that they're kind of putting it here makes it seem like, oh, atheists just assume that there's no God. No, we don't have evidence that one needs to exist or does exist.
And I think very easily dismissed.
Well, it's an argument from the physical world. That there's no apparent point to what I'm seeing with all this stuff in the physical world.
I feel like the way that he phrased that is rather ambiguous. What does it mean for it to have a point? I've been interpreting that as like a transcendent purpose. Like there's no purpose for nature other than just to exist. And I think that that's a perfectly fine answer, that there's no ultimate purpose or transcendent purpose, as if there needs to be an intelligent being that created all this for some ultimate purpose, which in Christianity, the ultimate purpose is to suck his dick, okay? To praise him 24/7, do everything for him. That's the purpose that they're talking about. Yeah, I don't think that us being on this earth, the reason for that or the point to that is so that we can praise this dickhead God, because God, the Christian God is a dickhead. That's certifiable. In the Old Testament, you just read it, total dickhole, okay? That's what God is in the Old Testament. I don't think that there needs to be that transcendent purpose or any transcendent purpose for us to just enjoy fucking life.
But that's just assuming that this is not the first stage in God's plan for a new heaven and a new earth.
Okay, show me the evidence that there is a plan, that plan, which is a very Christian plan, by the way. I don't see the evidence for that particular idea. And it's not that we haven't considered that idea. Most atheists have grown up in some kind of religion. And for me, it was Christianity. So I've definitely considered that idea. It's just that we don't have any evidence that points in that direction. So there's no reason for me to further consider it. If you have some evidence that shows us that that is the plan or that is the end goal or something like that, then fine. We'll throw that right back into the mix. We'll roll the dice for initiative or whatever in the fuck and see what it comes up with. I mean, it just seems like she's complaining that like, oh, they're not taking my idea seriously and factoring that in, because then they would really know that, oh, well, I don't know if it's this magical explanation or if it's just a purely natural one, which if you go with uniformitarianism, you would understand that the natural processes that happen the same now as they did in the past, and they don't need an intelligent being there in order for them to work. So it doesn't seem like a God is necessary for any of that. And as far as the implications that we're seeing in our universe now, it seems like we're careening to heat death, and that at some point we're going to reach this heat death of the universe. And at that point, which is very far off into the future, everybody that's alive now will not have to worry about that, but potentially people in the future will, the far distant future. But when we're careening towards the heat death of the universe and just everything going cold, it doesn't seem like there's this new heaven or new earth. That's just some bullshit that was made up and that people bought hook, line, and sinker because they don't want to think about the universe careening towards heat death. And
a new earth specifically. And so it's a circular argument.
Okay, well, what about some of the other things?
Those are very serious arguments. The imperfections, the suffering, the evil, of course, human evil, we can blame ourselves for that. And if you believe in free will, as the atheists do in probably the same percentages as the theists do, you've perhaps even got less reason to think that to expect people to treat one another well. And so human evil shouldn't be any better argument against the existence of God than for I'll start over there. So human evil shouldn't be any stronger argument against God than for God.
Now, okay, so the problem of evil, I do agree with her. I'll start from a point of agreement that the problem of evil is ineffective against a general idea of God. Like a general idea of a God existing, I don't think that the problem of evil is all that powerful against it. Now, that's because the general idea of a God doesn't really have a lot of attributes, tacked onto him. Like we don't have like a very fleshed out description of him, but the problem of evil is very effective against Yahweh or the Christian God, because the Christian God's supposed to be omnibenevolent. I get that people have free will, but I think that there's no harm necessarily in God implementing consequences for people that choose to use their free will in ways that he doesn't want them to. I mean, he was doing it all over the Old Testament. He would have the Israelites go in and kill an entire group of people. He'd genocide the fuck out of them, despite what Dr. William Lane Craig wants to think. He would have them genocide a whole group of people because they were not doing the things that he wanted them to do. So he sends them to hell. I don't think that it's out of the wheelhouse of God to implement consequences for not doing the things that he wants us to do, because he's already been shown that he will do that. Now, what could that look like? Could it, because I mentioned this on Vice Rhino's stream lately or recently, and he was like, that's a little impractical. I think the more practical implementation would just be these, like, if you think about, raping a kid, you slip and you trip and fall and break your dick or something. Me personally, I like the view of God popping into existence and punching somebody in the dick and then popping out whenever they decide to use their free will in horrible ways, like raping young children. If you were to transpose that to just like a normal human person, like Superman popping in, punching some dude in the dick, I guess lightly, and then popping out and then doing it again if he starts to move in that direction again, like you're not affecting that person's free will. You're just providing consequences for them exercising the free will in the ways that you don't want them to. As far as the problem of evil goes, effective against Yahweh or the Christian God, not effective against the general idea of God. So I wouldn't use the problem of evil to say God doesn't exist, but I would use the problem of evil to suggest that there is a problem with the description of the Christian God, which that's the one that she is providing here in this video, which is very confusing because on the one hand, she's talking about like this new heaven, new earth, and all this other stuff as the responses to the other issues that she can easily dismiss. But on this particular issue, she just appeals to a general definition of God. Seems like she's, kind of playing with some equivocation here. One thing that I didn't cover that I wanted to was this idea that nature is amoral, so it doesn't really care about what is moral and isn't moral, but morality itself is subjective. So when she says that, like, we should expect humans to exercise their free will and be horrible about it, I just think that that's a consequence of like just nature in general being amoral and us with our complex central nervous systems coming to moral conclusions, and morality itself just generally being a subjective thing. And so we should totally expect humans to be shitty. What we shouldn't expect, if God were to exist and that God is omnibenevolent, is for humans to be allowed to be shitty. That's the thing. It's not that on this idea of Christianity we should expect robots or people that can't exercise their free will. We're expecting God not to allow the shitty behavior to happen. And that's due to the fact that in the Bible, God does shit when people are doing things he doesn't want them to do. He actively does things. This is a problem of their own making.
The suffering and imperfection, those have been, I think, rather intractable problems for theists, at least since the development of evolutionary biology. For a long time, the standard Christian story was that suffering of humans, undeserved suffering, or apparently undeserved suffering, and suffering of animals, natural calamities like tsunamis, earthquakes, famines, etc. These could all be explained as either punishment for human sin or a causal consequence of human sin, because it disordered the chain of command from God to the angels to humans to the organic and inorganic world. So the chain of command is broken, and then the natural world is all disordered.
And this explanation makes more sense to you, to this person? Like, this person here thinks that that makes more sense than just sometimes bad shit happens. Nature's amoral. Nature doesn't give a shit about our perception of morality or our subjective rules about what's morally good, right, or wrong, or bad, or evil. It seems to me that a lot of Christians think this way, that it makes more sense to think that a woman eating fruit from a tree that she wasn't supposed to, without the knowledge that it was bad to disobey God, by the way, eating that fruit apparently just fucked all of God's shit up. You're trying to tell me that the most powerful and intelligent being in the world was foiled by fruit salad? Did God think this shit through, or did God need Eve to disobey him in order for all of this shit to play out like it did? Because if you're trying to tell me the smartest motherfucker in the room didn't think that somebody was gonna take a bite of that fruit after telling them not to, I just don't believe it. Like, there's no way, if he's the most intelligent being, he knows everything, that he didn't know she was gonna make a fruit salad with that motherfucker. He knew it. He should have known it. He made her from fucking Adam's rib. He should have been like, oh, that bitch likes fruit. Like, he should have known that. But this makes more sense than just nature doesn't give a shit, because nature can't give a shit, and nature doesn't have a mind, and so it can't make moral judgments, and so it can't impose moral ideas on living organisms. It makes more sense. Magical fruit fucked shit up versus just nature exists and doesn't give a shit about us. I will never understand the appeal to magic.
But once that storyline of historic fall, disordering of the once previous cosmos, etc., has been destroyed, first of all, simply by historical criticism, we no longer believe that those books of the Bible are historical narrative. But then in particular with the advent of evolutionary biology, where we know that the animals were suffering for eons before humans appeared on the scene to sin, there hasn't been any really good explanation for all of that suffering.
Well, there hasn't been a good explanation for all the suffering because Christians describe their God as omnibenevolent, regardless of whether or not, somebody ate a fruit from a tree they weren't supposed to or did whatever. I think that you would need to explain the unnecessary suffering of any life in the universe based on this whole idea of an omnibenevolent God. I mean, obviously with the Old Testament, I don't see how you can say that God is omnibenevolent other than gaslighting people into thinking that, God only does this stuff because he's good and it hurts him more than it hurts us, and all this other toxic, abusive sort of rhetoric that's often used in toxic, abusive relationships. I feel like it's the omnibenevolence of God that is the problem here. If you were to just say, oh yeah, God's a dickhole, but he'll fuck you up if you don't follow what he says. Like, I don't think that we would have such a problem with evil if Christians didn't have this omnibenevolence tacked onto Yahweh. I mean, if they would just say that, yeah, God's kind of a dick, but what are you going to do? He's God. I know that that's not the party line of Christians, but it was the party line of like the Israelites and the Jews later, that, God is a jealous God and he will fuck you up if you don't do what he tells you to do. Like, they had no problem saying that kind of shit.
But the philosopher Leibniz in the 1800s suggested that the more we know about the way the universe is interconnected, the more we see that we can't change one bit of it without changing a whole lot of the rest of it. And as science has developed, particularly what we know about the so-called fine-tuning of the natural laws, we can see that the universe, in terms of its basic physical structure, had to be almost exactly what it is like in order for us to be here.
So in order for our exact universe to be here, yes, the physical laws have to exactly be what they are, but that doesn't mean that there can't be another configuration where life still appears in the universe. Oftentimes, these constants are affected by other constants. And so if you change one constant, who's to say that other constants wouldn't change to compensate? And all these other different intricacies that we just simply don't even know know about yet. Changing one constant changes another constant, which changes this law and changes that law. It would just be a different universe with a different set of laws and a different set of constants. That's it. She's making an argument from hyper specifically, well, it has to be this way for our universe to be here. Who's to say that this is the only configuration that produces life? This is the only configuration that we know of that produces life, but that doesn't mean that we can rule out all other configurations as not producing life because ours does. Other configurations can. We have discovered life in some of the most inhospitable places. So if life can develop and thrive there, then life can develop and thrive in a universe with different laws and constants and different physical makeup in general. Another thing I didn't really cover earlier was her bringing up evolution and how evolution somehow factors into all this. There are theistic evolutionists out there, even Christian evolutionists. It doesn't make a lot of sense to me to throw evolution in there and be like, oh, evolution caused a lot of problems. It's like, oh, only for the creationists that, dogmatically hold to the, first 5 books being history. Like those kinds of people, it throws a kink in their tank, for those people like Ken Ham and Kent Hovind, but it doesn't throw a wrench in everybody's. I mean, there are plenty of Christians that accept evolution for the fact that it is and are still Christian. So I don't think that really causes a big problem for it.
Well, let's look at the wastefulness of the universe, where we have all this intergalactic dust. We have millions of asteroids crashing into one another. Every time we look at another planet and get one of our spacecraft there, they're pockmarked with the remnants of collisions, and it seems like there is so much chaos in the universe that we have all this abundance of what it seems to be absurd.
Obviously, she's got problems with what he just said. A lot of the things that he talked about there are very subjective because from his point of view, he sees it as chaos. I don't think that it's necessarily chaos. I just think that that's just the natural world operating like it always has, because comets colliding into other objects and everything like that, like there's nothing chaotic about that. That's just what happens out there in the universe. We've seen it happen. These dust clouds collapsing and forming entire solar systems. That's just something that happens. It's not chaos. Chaos is a very subjective determination of what you're seeing. If we were to look out into the universe one day and we would in real time see the pillars of creation collapse and start to form a universe, somebody could see that as like chaotic, like, oh fuck, what's going on over there? Holy shit. Or you could see it as like a beautiful birth of a new solar system, which, I mean, we've seen the births of new planets and everything like that, and you could see that as chaotic, or you could see it as the birth of a new planet or the birth of a new solar system or a new star or anything like that. Like it's all in your perception of things. So everything he said was very subjective about how the natural world works.
Who says it's wasteful? I mean, that's a value judgment.
So where the wasteful part comes in all of that is that this idea that God created this universe, right? And it's specifically the Yahweh God that created everything. And he created the earth and the entire universe for us. Like we're the only organisms that have attained this sentient state to where we would know this Yahweh God. I'm not saying that we're the only organisms ever with sentience or anything like that, or that there's not some kind of semi-sentient creatures that are already on this earth, because there obviously are some semi-sentient or some creatures with some semblance of sentience on the planet now. We're the only organisms that have reached this place where we have come up with this Yahweh God. And so to think about how we are just a small speck in the vastness of the universe, and for all we know, and well, specifically for Christianity, life doesn't exist elsewhere. Life exists nowhere else. It's us. God created the entire universe, the vastness of the universe, so that he could put life on just one tiny speck in one tiny corner of the entire universe. If that doesn't seem wasteful, I just don't even know what to do with you, because that seems entirely wasteful, especially if you consider this whole idea that this God is an intelligent designer. I mean, if this God's an intelligent designer, why is he wasting all of his material? Is seemingly wasting all of his material. And if he's not wasting using his material and he's like actually putting pockets of organisms in different planets all over the universe. If he's doing that, then why doesn't he clue us into all these other like societies and planets and organisms that also believe in him? Like, if you were to show me another planet that came up with the exact definition of Yahweh that we have, the exact Bible that we have, but it's on like a completely different planet that's completely independent from us. We haven't been there. Nobody's touched it. There's been no missionaries that have been sent across the vastness of space in order to reach there and spread the word of Jesus. I think that right there would be pretty mind-blowing evidence for the Yahweh God. Considering that we have found no other organisms yet, that doesn't mean that no other organisms exist, but considering that we haven't found other organisms, and on this earth itself, you have many different ideas about what this God could be or what the gods could be, because there's plenty of polytheistic people out there. There's plenty of polytheistic cultures. There are plenty of cultures out there with different gods, with thousands of gods. It seems to me highly unlikely that we would find another incarnation of Christianity in the exact form that we have it now. But you're going to try to tell me that this intelligent designer, this intelligent engineer created the entirety of the universe, the many trillions upon trillions of other planets, but he only put us on this one lonely blue rock. Well, it would be blue from a distance, whatever in the fuck. This blue speck in the midst of all of this darkness. That's it? You're going to tell me that's not wasteful?
Maybe it's wonderful that it's all out there. There's a psalm that I quote a fragment of, and I probably won't get the words right, but when I look at the stars, the work of your hands, what is man that thou art mindful of him? You know, number the stars, number the grains of sand on the beach, and then think, who is man that thou art mindful of him in the midst of this universe that we now know is so much bigger than the psalmist could ever have imagined? It's glorious to have all of that out there. God must enjoy it. And as we are able to take photographs of it and enjoy it, it's marvelous for us too. It's a value judgment to say that it's waste.
I mean, it's waste if God's not doing something with it. There are portions of the universe that we will never see, that are so many millions of light years away from us. We'll never see them. Naturally, I mean, we'll never see them. I guess I meant billions of light years away, not millions, billions of light years away. It seems weird to me to say that it's not wasteful for this universe to, one, have so much stuff in it that doesn't have life on it. That seems wasteful for one. For two, with the fact that most of the universe is actually empty. The space between the pockets of matter that consumes how big our universe is, like the majority of our universe is empty space. How is that not wasteful? I don't understand this. She's making a value judgment about it, but she's just sort of chastising the response to this idea of an intelligent designer. She's chastising them for being like, well, you're just assuming that it's all wasted. You don't know that. Well, in the same way, you don't fucking know that your God exists. You don't have evidence for it. You have feelings. There are feelings. There are experiences. There's no like evidence of it. I get that she thinks that she has evidence in the fine tuning of the universe or morality or free will or whatever in the fuck she said about Eve disrupting the entire order of the universe by eating a fruit salad. She thinks those are pieces of evidence for her God, but they're not. Like, they don't prove her God. It seems like she's just casting doubt on the response just because the response doesn't work for her idea of God or her idea of the universe.
Now, another really important argument that people keep raising is the wastefulness of the evolutionary process.
The wastefulness of the evolutionary process. How is there wastefulness in that? I mean, because it's just a process. It would also depend on how you defined waste. Like in that particular context, what's considered wasteful? Who would be wasteful? That would be waste. How much does one person have to shit before they grow another appendage so that they can wipe their own ass? I mean, come on, how much shit has to be wasted? I guess I don't understand what it means for there to be like the waste in the evolutionary process. We'll find out here in a second.
But that also is a faulty argument. You can't have evolution without death. Where would there be room for all of us if all the dinosaurs were still alive?
the whole death entering into this world is actually Eve's fault in the Christian theology. So it kind of seems to me like she's shooting herself in the foot at this point, because in order to have this criticism of evolution, you would have to also have this criticism of the Genesis story, because you would have to agree that Eve had to eat the apple. Otherwise, death would not be introduced into this life. There would be, quote unquote, dinosaurs walking around, as Ken Ham would have us believe. Dinosaurs wouldn't have died. If Eve hadn't have eaten the apple and disrupted all of the order of reality, according to her, dinosaurs would be alive now. But she's also defining waste in the evolutionary process as death. I don't think that death is wasteful as far as evolution goes, because death is just what happens to organisms. Not, well, there's that one jellyfish that's supposedly, quote unquote, immortal. Death is just something that happens. Organisms don't live forever. Evolution is the description of the change in a group of organisms over time. I don't see how that can be wasteful, and death is, in this particular context, is not wasteful, because it's it's a part of the process. So that's not wasteful. I guess what you could consider wasteful would be if you have a group of organisms that the ones that survive the best in the environment don't propagate their genes, and so the group of organisms steadily become weaker and weaker in that environment. That you may be able to describe that as wasteful, but evolution would eventually weed that out. Like, they can't continue that for several generations. I mean, at some point that group of organism would cease to exist. And so if they're wasteful in the process, then they're just not going to survive. But again, that's not how life works. Life works by surviving. That's how life propagates. So I just totally disagree with her on the whole idea of waste in the evolutionary process.
The evolutionary process requires the dying out of individuals. And it also probably requires the dying out of some species so that they can be replaced by species with higher powers.
Higher powers? Like, what the fuck is this? Goddamn X-Men?
Lasers out his hand.
The lasers out of his hands?
Literally just saw it.
Fuck you, Satan! As far as death being required in evolution, the thing that evolution requires is just the passing on of genes. Now, death is part of that process. I don't think that her characterizing it as death is required of the process. I don't really necessarily see that. I see death as just being an integral part of it that happens. There's nothing we can do about it, right? Because, things die eventually. That's just a fact of reality. The thing that evolution needs in order for it to be able to describe the changes over multiple generations is for genes to be passed on from one generation to another. You would still have evolution if, as soon as an organism passed off its genes to the next generation, it just zapped out of our reality and into its own reality, where it could fuck off and do its own thing. Not necessarily dying, but, because it can't live forever, it fucks off to some other dimension or something. There would still be evolution in that group of organisms in that situation with no death involved. So evolution doesn't require death. It requires the passing on of genes.
It's not waste.
Some would say that your whole argument is one of rationalization.
What has fucking seemed rational that has come out of her mouth yet? I'm just asking right now. Has anything been rational yet? Because maybe he's trying to say that she's trying to rationalize her faith or something like that, but nothing has seemed rational. She lost me at the whole Eve ate fruit salad and disrupted the order of the universe because not everybody was sucking God dick.
Tough. No, it makes the point that you can't simply argue from a few bits of observation to God exists or God doesn't exist. These are total worldviews. These are totally different ways of looking at the whole of reality. And you can't take someone from one of these worldviews and say, here, let me rub your nose in a few of these details, and poof, you're going to change that person's mind. I, as a theist, see the whole world differently, I'm sure, than the way the naturalists see it. And silly as this might sound, I sometimes look at a sequoia tree and I think of it as reaching up to God.
So let me get this straight. The naturalists see a tree and the tree grows up, right, towards the sky, because that's just where it goes. That's where the sun is. That's where it gets its energy from. You can even do experiments on your own with plants and like on your windowsill, because they'll always grow towards the light. They always go towards the light. Wherever that light happens to be from, that's the direction that they'll grow in. Trees outside grow up because and they'll even change. Like there are some, I believe, is it sunflowers that they actually change the way that they face?
Most flowers do that.
Well, yeah, but I mean that goes back to the whole they grow towards the light. So that's a naturalist view, and then you've got her view. The trees are growing up so that they can reach towards God. How am I supposed to take that seriously? This woman, I've got it in the description, like a description of Nancey Murphy. All right, it says Nancey is a philosopher and theologian who is a professor of Christian philosophy at Fuller Theological Seminary in Pasadena, California. She received a BA from Creighton University in philosophy and psychology and a PhD from the University of California, Berkeley in philosophy of science, and a theological degree from the Graduate Theological Union. Despite all that education, trees grow towards the sky because they're reaching towards God.
It's fucking stupid.
How am I supposed to take that seriously? That's right, honey. I can't. And but of course she's over there just like, deal with it, atheists. This is the state of the conversation, I feel, as far as like explaining our universe or proving God or something like that. We have rational people over here who were like, oh yeah, you know, the reason why plants grow towards the sun is because of this reason. And then you've got people like her over here that are like, they're reaching for God. That's why. As far as the arguments go and the discussion goes, that's where we're at. Every single time I see an argument about whether or not God exists, I'm going to think about this moment of it grow towards God. Like, that's what I'm going to think about.
Naturalists can't see trees like that. And I can't make a naturalist see a tree as praying.
You're not going to get most Christians to believe that trees are praying, idiots.
Yeah, I think that it would be hard to convince any rational person that trees are praying for God or towards God or anything like that.
Trees pray. We can just stop there.
Trees aren't sentient. Oh my God.
But
Do you mean that as metaphor or as reality?
Even he's fucked up.
The host had to clarify because of the shit that she just said. Like, he's like, surely she means metaphorically praying here. Oh my God, I can't wait for this answer. I hadn't made it this far in the video because I was like, surely there's nothing crazy that's gonna happen after this point. And then of course Nancey comes in with trees are praying to God, and the host is like, you mean metaphorically? Please tell me you mean metaphorically, because plants don't pray. Let's see what she's got.
metaphor, but
Sorry, yeah, I know I was muted. So it's metaphor. I don't understand why anything that she said would be a clear indication of metaphor. Like, even the host was like, you mean metaphorically? Or like, what are you talking about here? The way that she said everything made it seem like she thinks that trees are literally praying to God. I think that she needs to do a better job of communicating that she means metaphorically trees are praying to God. But even then, I don't know what that fucking means. Is this another look at the trees argument? Like, is that what this is? I feel like that's what this is. It's just another look at the trees argument.
it's just an illustration of what a different world the theist lives in from the world that the naturalist lives in.
So when she says things like, this is the world that theists live in, I mean, this makes me think that she literally thinks that trees are praying towards God. And the trees are reaching towards God. So she's still continuing this like weird communication that makes me question whether or not she means literally. On the one hand, she seems to mean literally this is the worldview of theists. But on the other hand, she's like, no, this is just all metaphor. Fuck are you talking about? Could you pick a fucking lane, please? No, honey, I've never known apologists to be consistent. You're right.
And you can't just say, point at these few different aspects and presto, you're going to convince someone from the other worldview that, oh my gosh, I've been wrong about all of this and I've got to change my mind.
She talks about, pointing out these few things. But I mean, if she points out evidence that points towards a God, I mean, you could quite likely change someone's mind. And I mean, maybe you're not the one that changes somebody's mind, but at some point down the line, you're going to contribute to what changes that person's mind. So, I mean, I don't think that you should expect to change someone's mind right on the spot. With the evidence that they bring forth, no, that is never going to change somebody that's not considering that trees are praying to God. I was not convinced by what she had to say tonight. I think that, her apologetics to get around the pushback of the claims of their God, I don't think that they did their job. I think that they were severely lacking in explanatory power and in accounting for the evidence that we already have. So it seems like, she did a very poor apologetic job, which she seems to be an educated apologist, which I'm using that very generously. If the worldview of Christians is that plants pray to God, you're right. I will never take that seriously. I would never be able to view plants or non-sentient animals or even sentient animals praying to God as the worldview. Obviously, there are sentient animals that pray to God because, we're animals. But I mean, what I mean is just nature itself, like nature that's amoral, that's without sentience, without any intelligence. That's not saying anything to God. That's not acknowledging God. That's not a testament to God. You first need to establish that God is required for any of that to exist and operate in order for it to attest to a God. Apologists never do that. They never try to actually attest to a God. They just expect you to get on board with fucking plants praying to God because they grow straight fucking up on occasion, not all the time. So anyways, yeah, I wasn't impressed. I don't know if y'all were impressed, but I'd love to hear your thoughts down in the comments. I guess we will see you heathens later. Don't forget to stand up and use your voice. Bye, heathens.